They drained my lake. My lake. Without asking, without warning, without even considering what it meant for me, my property, or my family. And for what? A so-called flood risk. That's how this whole mess started. My name's Daniel, and until last year, I thought my neighborhood was paradise. Picture it, a quiet cul-de-sac with neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, and in the very center of it all, a beautiful, crystal-clear private lake. That lake wasn't just for show. It was where my kids learned to fish, where my wife and I took the paddle boat out at sunset, and where neighborhood barbecues always ended with kids splashing in the shallows. It was more than water. It was our life. But then came the HOA. Now, I'd had my share of spats with our HOA before. They loved sending nasty letters about the color of my mailbox or the improper angle of my garden gnome. But draining my lake? That was a whole new level. One morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I thought it was road work at first. But when I stepped outside, I saw trucks, pumps, and workers right on my property line. They were draining the lake. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, storming down the slope. A man in a reflective vest looked up casually. "Orders from the HOA, sir. Flood risk mitigation." Flood risk? I was furious. My property sat on higher ground. The lake had been there for decades without a single incident. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. By evening, my once beautiful lake was reduced to a muddy crater. Fish flopped helplessly in shallow puddles. The herons that usually perched by the reeds were gone. My kids stood beside me, crying. The next day, the HOA president, a smug woman named Karen, yes, really, sent me an email. "The committee has determined that the lake poses a liability to the community. Effective immediately, it will remain drained for the foreseeable future. We appreciate your cooperation." Cooperation. As if I had a choice. You'd think draining the lake would hurt me most. But here's the thing about water. It doesn't just disappear. Without the lake acting as a reservoir, rainwater had nowhere to go. The natural drainage system was destroyed. Within weeks, every storm turned into a nightmare. The lower homes, the very ones whose owners voted to drain the lake, started flooding. Lawns became marshes. Basements filled with water. Mosquitoes multiplied like crazy, breeding in stagnant puddles. And suddenly, the HOA that prided itself on its prestigious image looked like a swamp village. Look, I'm not a vengeful guy. At first, I tried reason. I wrote letters. I attended meetings. I brought photos of the damage, videos of kids wading through knee-deep water, even quotes from engineers saying the lake had been a natural flood buffer. But every time I spoke, Karen cut me off. "Mr. Daniels," she'd say with that condescending tone, "the committee has already decided. We cannot risk a catastrophic flood event." Catastrophic flood? The only floods happening were in their yards, not mine. But they refused to listen. That's when I realized they didn't just want to drain the lake. They wanted to break me. One afternoon, I came home to find a fine notice taped to my door. The HOA was charging me $500 a week for unsightly conditions. What were those conditions, you ask? The mud pit that used to be my lake. The lake they drained. That was the last straw. They destroyed my property, wrecked the neighborhood ecosystem, and now they were charging me for it? I snapped. You see, I'm not just some guy with a fishing pole and a barbecue grill. I'm a civil engineer. Water management is literally my field of expertise. So if they wanted to play games with water, I was about to drown them in their own stupidity. I spent weeks quietly setting up a system on my land. A combination of pumps, underground pipes, and barriers, all designed to redirect rainwater. Not into my property. Not into the street. But straight back into the HOA's prized cul-de-sac. The first heavy storm hit in mid-April. While my property stayed dry as a bone, the HOA president's yard turned into a swamp. Her ornamental rose garden? Submerged. Her white picket fence? Tilted sideways in the mud. By the second storm, it wasn't just Karen. The vice president's basement flooded up to his knees. Another board member's brand new deck floated off its supports. And me. I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching ducks swim where their driveways used to be. It didn't take long before Karen stormed up to my door, drenched and furious. "You did this!" she screeched, pointing to the swamp that used to be her front yard. I raised an eyebrow. Funny, I thought draining the lake was supposed to prevent flooding. She turned red. "You'll pay for this. We'll sue you into the ground." I laughed. "Go ahead. But every expert in town will tell you the same thing. You destroyed the natural drainage system. This is on you." And I was right. The HOA actually tried to take me to court. They claimed I'd sabotaged the community with my unauthorized engineering. But when the judge asked for evidence, all I had to do was present photos of the lake before and after they drained it, expert testimony showing the lake prevented flooding, emails from the HOA admitting they ordered the draining. The judge didn't just dismiss their case. He scolded them. Then, he ordered the HOA to pay me damages for property destruction. That's right. Not only did their lawsuit fail, but they had to cut me a check. The court ruling forced them to restore the lake. But you know what? By then, the damage to their homes was already done. Foundations cracked, lawns ruined, mold infestations everywhere. And while they scrambled to fix their mess, I enjoyed watching the lake slowly fill back up, sparkling under the summer sun like it had never left. My kids were back to fishing. My wife was back to paddle boating. And the HOA? They were stuck spending tens of thousands in repairs, all because of their arrogance. So what's the takeaway here? It's simple. When you try to control nature, or people, you'd better be ready for the consequences. The HOA thought they could bully me into submission. They thought their titles, their positions, and their so-called rules were more powerful than common sense. But what they forgot is that real power doesn't come from paperwork or committees. Real power comes from balance, from understanding the world around you and treating people with respect. Nature is stubborn. It doesn't care about your regulations, your bylaws, or your endless meetings. If you drain a lake, the water won't disappear. It'll find its way back, and often in ways you can't control. And people? They're a lot like that too. Push them too far, ignore their voices, or try to silence them, and eventually they'll push back. Harder than you ever expected. The HOA wanted to prove they were in charge. But in trying to control everything, they lost the very thing they claimed to protect, their own community. They turned their streets into swamps, their homes into flood zones, and their reputations into a joke. And it wasn't because of some outside enemy, it was because of their own arrogance. Respect isn't earned by barking orders or waving around authority. It's earned by listening, by working with people, not against them, by recognizing that sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one holding all the answers. So if there's one lesson here, it's this: you can't outvote common sense, and you can't bully nature into obeying. And if you try, well, don't be surprised when the swamp comes for you.